Welcome to another edition of Green is Good. This is the Hollywood Goes Green is Good with my friend and co-host Debbie Levin. She's the president of the Environmental Media Association. And today we're so honored to have with us John Quigley. Debbie, you want to introduce John to our guests?
I do. John and I have been friends for over 15 years. And so John is, let's see, how do you describe John? He is everyone's hero in the environmental world. That's like the short version, but he is an activist, he's a producer, John is the guy that everyone wants to be. John does all those amazing things that every environmentalist that really wants to do. So I think that we should really get started and start talking right now because really, John is able to make things happen and goes to the places where things are happening in the world and really helps affect change. And this is so important in what is going on in the world right now. And we're at a very pivotal time in the environment and in policy and in action and in issues, and I would love to get right to it. So welcome, John.
John, welcome. And before we get talking about some of the hot topics, as Debbie says, and no pun intended, share a little bit from your own perspective, your journey, your biography, being a producer, an activist, an environmentalist.
Thank you. It's great to be here, John.
Thank you.
And Debbie, I appreciate the intro. There's so many folks out there who are doing incredible work, and they're the real heroes on the front lines. And I would say my impulse to make the world a better place, to back in the day when I really started, it was all about saving the earth. Back in the late 80s, it was after the Exxon oil spill, and Earth Day 1990 came along, and I just jumped in and got into the scene and started doing things. And really, I always look towards what is the next step, the next best thing that is going to move us in the direction of bringing about ecological balance. Because back at that time, it was clear that we were heading in a direction, and we're still heading in that direction, although there's a lot more awareness now, a lot more environmental awareness than there was at that time. So my career has spanned a spectrum of activities, and I've put on the artist hat, I've put on the activist hat, I've put on the producer hat, always sort of spurred by the urgent call on an issue here or there. And it's led me to live in trees for long periods of time to keep them from being cut down, to lobbying at the UN, to producing large-scale spectacle events, concerts, videos, which we've done with EMA on really critical issues recently. So I guess you'd call me kind of a wild card in that sense.
For our listeners and our viewers that want to find you, they can find you at www.spectralq.com. And also counterspill.com.
Counterspill.com is one of the projects that I was a co-founder with a documentary filmmaker, great documentary filmmaker, Chris Payne, in response to the BP oil spill.
Wow. And
the goal of Counterspill was to kind of counter the spin of the BP PR machine. And right now we believe it's the largest archive of fossil fuel disasters over the last 100 years in terms of archiving spills, everything from Fukushima to various oil spills and other disasters. And there's a real need. You know, we're at a historical moment where we're transitioning from this economy that has been based on fossil fuels for the last 150 years or so. And it's a difficult transition, and people are playing different roles. And fortunately now, this emergence of the renewable economy with the explosion in solar and all of these things, that it's inevitable, but it's painful as well. And it's really important that people understand, you know, fossil fuels. I have a friend that I just worked with in Nebraska, whose farm
Can you tell that story? Because I wanted you to talk about that last project, about the Nebraska story.
Well, and I think this is a good segue because we did a project on the Keystone Pipeline route. My friend Art Tanderup and his wife Helen, their farm is right on the route. It's threatened by this pipeline. Underneath their farm is the largest aquifer in America, the Ogallala Aquifer. It's 30% of
Can you explain what that is for our listeners?
Oh yes, well an aquifer it's a body of fresh water
Wow.
that sits under the land, and it's where, you know, when you dig a well, the water is coming from an aquifer. And this aquifer it actually spans 5 states, and it represents 30% of our agricultural water in the United States. So it's
30%.
30%.
That is huge.
Oh my gosh.
So
Huge.
this foreign corporation, TransCanada, wants to put a pipeline of the dirtiest type of fossil fuel, tar sands, directly through this aquifer. It makes no sense. It's a classic case of money, you know, trumping all other values. So anyway, he and I met, and first we joined together to create the world's largest crop art.
And again, explain what crop art is.
Well, it was basically a giant drawing in one of his cornfields to send a message. It was the image of a cowboy and Indian. It said Heartland No KXL, which is the hashtag for stopping the Keystone Pipeline for the movement. And it had a huge response. It was a half a mile by a quarter of a mile.
And when you do say a huge response, how did people see this?
Major media. It was AP's big story that day.
Wow.
It was in hundreds of outlets all over North America. And in fact, the Wall Street Journal used that image to illustrate the article about President Obama delaying his decision last April. So it became sort of a visual stamp that represented the Heartland's response, the call, the cry from the Heartland.
And this is not a touchy-feely liberal neighborhood in
No,
Nebraska.
this is
why
red
it's
state,
so impactful.
Red state Nebraska. These are farmers and ranchers and tribes from South Dakota who've joined together in this Cowboy and Indian Alliance. And you know, here's the interesting thing. When it comes down to the basics, and it doesn't get much more basic than water.
Water.
Right?
Right.
And we're seeing that in California
Right.
with the drought. When it gets down to the basics, it makes
Galvanizes people.
from across the political spectrum. And we saw that there. And what was so interesting is this happened. It had a big impact. The decision was delayed. And that led to a follow-up event where we had Neil Young and Willie Nelson were generous enough to come out to the farm and throw a concert to benefit the farmers and ranchers and the tribes.
Wow, that's so cool.
In a cornfield.
Come on.
Yeah,
Yes.
it was.
Come
It was
on.
amazing.
Yes.
So the process of transforming this working farm into a concert venue, where we didn't lose a single crop, you know, that was a key
And
value.
we had to find non-GMO seeds.
That's right, with
Which-
Debbie and EMA,
Right.
because we were.
How do you plant it with GMO seeds?
Right,
Oh
right,
my
right,
God.
Right. So what was so interesting, and this comes back to the segue at the beginning of this little passage here, is that now Arts Farm, from the benefit, the proceeds from the concert, Arts Farm is completely solar.
That's
so here
so
you have
cool.
the intersection
on.
point,
Right.
the intersection point of the worst of the old,
Right.
and now the best of the new.
New.
And he put out a message the other day, another day without a solar spill. You know, and I just love that. I mean, when you
awesome.
just
Wow.
think common sense, it comes down to that.
That's just a
See,
great
that's why
stuff.
it's hard to say, like, what does John do? This is what John does. How do you explain what that is?
Making
This is
great
like-
things happen.
Right.
Making great things
exactly.
happen.
Right.
That's great. You know, we're also living in times, as Debbie pointed out at the top of the show, where other critical issues are reaching an apex. Water's one of them, and we know it better than anybody right here in California. But climate change is another.
Sure.
I know that's one of the issues that are near and dear and important to you, your heart. Can you share a little bit about, with our listeners, what the Paris Climate Talks are, why they're so important, and what's your involvement with regards to the Paris Climate Talks?
Well, Paris is an unprecedented opportunity for the world to take a giant leap forward on climate. I was at the Earth Summit in 1992 in Rio, where these climate conferences began.
Okay.
And I've been to many of them along the way. In fact, I stopped going for a while because it seemed like all they did was talk and nothing ever really happened. And 6 years ago, we had a real opportunity in Copenhagen. There was this last big moment like this.
Right.
And unfortunately, that collapsed. And there's a variety of reasons for that, but it was a huge disappointment. People picked themselves up off the ground, kind of dusted themselves off, and began slowly working to gain momentum again. And one of the big sticking points is that the two largest countries in the world by population, China and India, were saying, why should we limit our emissions when you guys created all of this mess by making yourselves rich and elevating your lifestyle, and now you want us to pay the price? Why can't we catch up?
Right.
Well, but there is something interesting that happened this year. Some people may be aware that in November, President Obama, when he was in China, created an agreement, a bilateral climate agreement between China and the United States to reduce emissions by 2030. I think it's between 26 and 28%, which was a huge breakthrough. And now that puts pressure on India, because it was the first time that China acknowledged the scope of the problem and expressed the commitment to actually take it on. And so this is one of the reasons why Paris is so important, because with that agreement, it sets the stage for the whole world to actually
And when is Paris? When is it coming up?
Paris is in December.
Okay.
And the key thing is, though, we've got the road to Paris and through Paris, because we need the drumbeat to get very loud well before Paris if we're going to get this agreement. And fortunately, there's other huge players who are getting involved. The Pope. You know, I was raised Catholic. Never thought I would love a Pope this much. You know?
He's pretty cool. No matter what you practice in terms of religion, this is a pretty cool Pope.
Yeah, well, he cares about people. He cares about the future. He cares about real things.
Right.
And he has made several major statements about climate change, and he's preparing to come out with an encyclical to the 1.3 billion Catholics, I believe there are in the world, telling them that they need to act on climate change.
What's an encyclical for our listeners?
An encyclical is basically a statement about an issue and a directive, an order, so to speak, that this is something important.
Got it.
And when that comes out in the next few months, that will have a huge impact. And then he's traveling to the United States in September, to Washington and New York. So that will be for
more of the drumbeat.
More of the drumbeat. And then you also have Al Gore jumping back into the fray in a big way, producing another Live Earth concert in June with Kevin Wall. And that will be a microphone, a platform, a global platform to just say, basically, the time is now. We have to get this done. And I think the significance, will it solve everything? No. But what it will do is it will set the bar much higher, and it will create the kind of atmosphere where I think you'll see a hyper acceleration in the business sector, something that's already happening on renewable energy. But I think it will also accelerate other strands that are part of this process.
John, you know, given that President Obama, with Ted Cruz now announcing that he's running for president, Hillary soon to probably be announcing, is now probably going into the sort of lame duck period of his presidency. Does that give him more latitude to accomplish something bigger in Paris than what happened in Copenhagen?
I believe so. I think for him it's legacy. This could be his greatest legacy.
Wow.
And we're hanging in the balance right now for his decision on Keystone. And I think Keystone is the first step on this road to Paris and beyond. And we're hopeful that we'll get a full rejection from him. He already vetoed the bill a few weeks ago. And I think, you know, with everything else that has gone on in his presidency, he knows that he will be on the right side of history if he can reject Keystone and he can get this deal done. Now, there's a lot of pressure on him, I'm sure, from the fossil fuel industry to go the other way. But if he can stay the course and continue down this path, that will be his greatest legacy.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I think that you're right. I think in having him be in this lame duck position, he can do this. And I think,
so amazing.
I think this is where he's going with, because this is in a sense winnable. Because it's not like the other issues that he's got. This is something that I think that he has enough support. And the fossil fuel industry he can kind of walk away from, in a sense, when he's done.
Because he doesn't have to run for
That's
anything
what I'm
anymore.
saying.
So this is great.
Yeah.
You know, John, share with our listeners two things. We're nearing the end here of this episode of Green is Good. Can you share with our listeners, though, your involvement with Paris? What are you doing, and how can our listeners join you in taking an action?
Well, one of the things, actually, Debbie and I have been in conversations with EMA. One of our goals is to rally the entertainment industry to amplify this opportunity.
Well, she's the person. That's awesome.
Exactly.
The two of you together.
And we've been working a lot. We've produced numerous videos the last few years on key issues, to ban fracking, to stop Keystone.
Right.
These are, I think Debbie and EMA are really to be saluted for that, because these are courageous stands. You know, sometimes we want to just sit there and recycle or this, and all those individual actions are important.
Right.
But taking on the leverage points, and these are the big ones. And so we recognize, and obviously EMA has been doing this for years, the power of people who can reach large audiences.
Right.
So we are crafting ways for them to use that power in service to this moment.
Got it.
And so
that makes sense.
And it's a challenge in moments, because everyone's got their career and their manager, they have their publicists managing them and all of that. But it's those communicators that create the safe space for, I saw it in Nebraska.
For change to happen.
Yeah, when Willie and Neil came to play a concert,
That's so
sold
cool.
out in a little over a day, in this remote town where we had more people at the concert than live in the entire county.
It's amazing. It was amazing.
That created the safe space for some of the politicians who were on the fence to go, oh, okay, the people are behind this. And that's the power of celebrities, of influencers, people who have audience. I mean, you're an influencer with your audience. And it's so important that these politicians who are being lobbied every day by entrenched
and they're
interests.
afraid, because as we were talking about with social media, they're afraid because these voices are really loud and they're really consistent, and we can get people to write op-ed pieces, and then that can be not only in the newspapers and the magazines that they're in, but then they can be tweeted out 9 million times and 40.
You're right.
And so the power of our voices are so much stronger than they ever were. And so, using that.
Great point, Debbie.
Right, and so it's something where we can use that platform and get the message out in a way that we never could, and it wasn't like that 6 years ago.
Well, and I think there's something, I always call it the rule of three.
Right.
For any person who wants to, who just like me, woke up one day and said, okay, I got to do something.
Right.
You have 3 rings of influence. The first is your personal actions.
Right.
What do you do with your life? Take a step in the right direction, whether it's with the energy you use or where you get your food. Food is a huge one. A UN study came out that said if food waste were a country, it would be the 3rd largest carbon emitter in the world after China and the US.
Wow.
So this has implications beyond just the scientific equation of CO2 emissions, right? So look at your own life and look at how you can change. But then the second is how you influence your friends and your business associates. And then the third, and this is often the most difficult for people, is influence your leaders. Raise your voice.
That's great.
We need big, courageous decisions. In fact, we need to make it so those decisions aren't even that courageous. They're just the right thing to do, because that's what we're coming into. And so find a way. And the way to do that, I'm sure through the EMA website, we'll have a link to ways that people can take action and send messages to President Obama or other leaders. But food, I know I kind of diverted, but everyone loves food.
Yeah, of course.
And I think that food is the delivery system for the new reality.
Wow.
Because we take it in 3 times a day. We have an emotional relationship with it. And if everyone were to start to cultivate food locally, on their rooftops, in their gardens, at the school, then what you do is you unplug from the big centralized system that is feeding you food-like products.
Right.
That is leading to obesity and all of these health issues and all of that. Not only do you get the health benefits, but you've also liberated yourself, at least to some extent, from this system that has been delivering the kind of world that we're facing right now. And so liberate your food, you know, find a way to get local, organic produce into your body, into your life. And that, just that act is revolutionary.
It's also a consciousness changer. Like, if you do that, everything else starts to make sense, and you start changing your behaviors and your thought process.
John, will you come back after Paris and tell us what happened there from your own perspective?
Sure.
Awesome.
Sure, I'd love to.
We'd love to have you back.
Yeah.
You know, Debbie, can you give your great website out to our listeners so they can take action and do what John just said and get involved, raise their voice, raise their courage level, and get out there and write articles and write op-eds and things of that such?
Yeah, it's ema-online.org.
Well, thank you. This has been another edition of Hollywood Goes Green is Good. For my co-host and great friend Debbie Levin, we had John Quigley with us today. To see more of John's great work, go to www.counterspill.com, or to find Job, go to Spectral, SPECTRALQ.com. John Quigley, you are truly living proof that green is good.